Hello, everybody. You got all three members of the not-so-grand jury here, which is rare for a sidebar. Normally, one of us has, I'd say, better things to do, but just,
We don't all need to be here for the sidebars all the time.
we don't necessarily all need to be here. Fair enough, Jeff. So we did not release a sidebar 2 weeks ago. One of the reasons we didn't release a sidebar was that Jeff and I were a little busy, basically helping to run a moot court competition called the Jessup competition, which, if you are an active listener to the podcast, you've heard us mention it, but we've probably never really dove too deep into it. We've talked a little bit about, how Jeff and I met, but we didn't really talk much about it. Well, you're going to hear a lot about it on this episode. The Philip C. Jessup International Moot Court Competition is a advocacy competition for law students. Teams of law students throughout the world compete against each other through the presentation of both oral and written pleadings. In other words, oral argument as well as written briefs, and talk about sort of issues of public international law that come up in a fictional legal dispute. So it is the world's largest moot court competition. There are participants from upwards of, this year is actually over 800 teams in over 100 countries compete. And Jeff and I met. Neither of us remember it.
Yeah.
But in fact, Jeff was a competitor in the competition, and I was a judge in the competition and judged Jeff.
And that's when they fell in love.
Well, you'd say that, but neither of us have any memory of a minute of that. I know I judged him. I don't have any memory, which means that Jeff was probably right in the meaty part of the curve as an average competitor. If I had to guess, Jeff.
I'll say, first, you make this sound way more dignified than it is. Derek and I spent a week and a few days essentially LARPing as judges. We were live-action role-playing as judges on the International Criminal Court.
Well, and then I'm going to say you make then I'm going to make it sound like you sound like this little thing, like it's somewhere in between.
But no, I would say yes. I fell somewhere in the middle. I did get on the list of. I didn't get an award for top oralist, but I was on the list of whatever it was, top 20 oralists or something like that. It was the New York Regional in 2013. So
well. Just to briefly talk about sort of the purpose of Jessup. So as I said, it's a, competition for law students. Basically, every year there is a fake problem is created with a bunch of agreed upon facts. And there is a fake oral argument in front of the International Court of Justice, which is a real court. That's the primary judicial organ of the United Nations. Interestingly, the actual ICJ does not have oral argument.
Nope.
But we do, because it's kind of an Americanized version of it, but it has become sort of the fun thing to do, which is each side gets about 45 minutes to do their pleadings. There are two competitors for each team that do the argument, so they each get about, give or take 21, 22 minutes, along with a rebuttal or surrebuttal. And they argue in front of a 3-judge panel, the judges being lawyers, or typically lawyers who have some knowledge of international law, and occasionally actual judges. For students who decide to compete in the Jessup competition, and Jeff can talk more about this than I can because he actually did compete, the competition can run for a while. You get the problem in September, and then you have, give or take, 4 months to get your act together and write the written briefing after doing a lot of legal research. And then soon after the written briefing goes in, you then have your national rounds, or in the case of some countries, regional rounds in January, February, or March. And then if you are able to advance to the international rounds, those happen at the end of March or early April. That is what Jeff and I were a part of a couple weeks ago, which was we were helping to administer the competition in the international round. So sort of the championship final, whatever you want to call it. It's a huge competition. This year, there was 834 teams registered from 101 countries. 3,500 students competed in some capacity. And that in of itself is pretty cool. The Olympics this year only had 93 countries represented. So this actually has more countries than the Olympics were actually represented in this competition, which is super fun. There are
also Winter Olympics.
I know it's the boring Olympics, but it's still Olympics, Jeff.
All right.
Yes, the summer has like 200, so it's a little different. It was a good thing it was a Winter Olympics year to give me that ability to say.
That's true.
There are some super fun alums who have competed in the Jessup competition. The sort of one that I actually learned about only a couple of days ago is the current president of Botswana competed in 1993, which is kind of fun.
That's not the shout out I thought you were going to make, but okay. Continue.
That's the one that I'm choosing to make because I just learned about it, and I did not know that Dumo Boko was a 1993 competitor.
Wow.
And then every year, so 100 and some odd teams, there was 170 teams that came to the international rounds. I say came to, actually about 150 did. 20 something were not here, and that's something that Jeff's going to talk about in a second. But when the teams compete, they go through this competition, they go through elimination rounds, and in the end, there's 2 teams left. They do a final round argument, typically in front of some of like the most well-known experts in the world. Last year, it was actually 3 current or former judges of the actual International Court of Justice, including the former president, the American Joan Donahue, and then there were the current members, Judge Nolte and Judge Robledo. This year, the ICJ judges didn't travel to the United States. I wonder why.
Yeah, tough to believe.
Shocked look for those who don't understand what's happening in world politics right now. So instead, we had to bring in, such lesser known people as Dapo Akande, who is probably the chair. He's the public international law chair at the University of Oxford, maybe the most prestigious, professorship in international law in the world. Soledad Garcia Munoz, who is the first ever special rapporteur for the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And for those of you who don't know what a special rapporteur is, it's an independent human rights expert appointed by the UN Human Rights Council to monitor, report, and advise on sort of specific human rights issues throughout the world. If you have been picked as a special rapporteur, you probably know your shit in that area. And then the third judge was James Anaya, who, if you know anything about international law, you probably know about James Anaya. He's a titan of the international law world and certainly focuses on the rights of indigenous people. And I believe also has been a special rapporteur when it comes to multiple different things. But there's a couple of things that are sort of cool about it. And I bring this up not just to sort of talk about generically the Jessup and bore you to death, because obviously only people who really are nerds such as Jeff and myself, as well as, I'm sure Mike will listen, but he's international law is not Mike's thing.
No, but I do like reading. I like hearing about your stories.
Oh, you do. You have more expertise in other areas that I know nothing about, which we appreciate. But I bring it up for a couple of reasons. The first is, and this is just a random thing, if you happen to be a lawyer who is interested in international law, I highly recommend you get involved. It is a lot of fun. You can judge, you can coach, you could be an administrator, whatever you want, whether it's in your home country or at the international rounds, which are, have been always held in Washington, D.C. It is very cool to have such a diverse group of students and professionals in one hotel for a week. And as I said, over 100 countries represented. At the end of the week, there is what they call the Go National Ball, where everyone sort of dresses in their garb from their home country. It's kind of a weird version of your home country Halloween, but it's really fun. So there are a lot of reasons to be a part of it. I really enjoy it, and I think it's just a really cool experience to be, to have. But the real reason I brought it up for purposes of our podcast is to talk about what Jeff had to do this year, and I'm going to talk about how stupid it is that Jeff had to do it, and why the United States is being real dumb when it comes to certain decisions that have been made by our wonderful administration. So first, Jeff, tell the people what you did, and I can then jump in as to why I wish you never had to do it.
Yeah, normally the international rounds of the competition are held in Washington, D.C., as they were this year, and all the students are there in person. It wasn't a little different. It was a lot different during COVID, where everyone was not going anywhere. But the rule has always been that everyone's there in DC competing together, in part for the benefit of the students. The students get to meet a ton of students who have the same interests, a ton of professionals who have the same interests. It's great career development for them. This year, not all the students could come because, well, we started a war with one of the countries. We, placed either outright visa bans on some of the countries or placed $100,000 bond requirements on getting a visa to enter the country at all. And so we didn't want to exclude all those students from those 23 countries. I mean, there are some obvious ones. The team from Iran was not able to come to the U.S., but also Israel, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Nigeria, Bhutan, Zambia, Botswana, Nepal, Bangladesh, Iraq couldn't attend, Oman couldn't attend, Sierra Leone couldn't attend. There were, I mean, the list goes on.
There was also a fun one where Uganda competed half online, then got their visas.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Like literally day 3 of the competition got their visas. So they canceled their hybrid rounds, got on a plane, came to DC, and then competed in 2 in-person rounds.
good for them.
Yeah. Some really cool stories came out of having to do these rounds. So like as Jeff's going to explain, they were hybrid rounds. One person was live, one team was live, one team was coming in remotely. So there was actually all the judges were in person, one team was in person, and there was one remote team.
Yeah.
I'm sure, it'd be very easy for one side to think that they were being biased by the situation. Did you guys feel that there was an advantage? Are you allowed to comment on that?
Sure. So I'll say for starters, the teams that were there, the teams that were able to attend in person, and I mean, basically all of the judges as well. Well, all the judges were in person. Most of the teams were in person. And everyone was hugely supportive of the effort that was done to allow these teams to come in, and gave a lot of grace to the international teams, the remote teams that were dealing with, oh my gosh, the standard Zoom connection problems, because it was all Zoom. My job during this, normally I go to the Jessup to hang out with friends of mine like Derek and Wes and Will, who have been on the podcast, and judge some law students and drink and have, nice dinners in the evening, and then do the whole thing again the next day. This time I was in charge of making sure that it worked. that all the courtrooms had working Zoom connections, working tech. Derek kind of drafted me into this as someone who would know how this should all fit together.
I was asked by the executive director who would be someone that would be a good, what they call them the hybrid administrator, who would be someone who knows stuff about tech. And I'm like, now do I have a guy who knows about tech, but he also knows about the competition. Also, I'm pretty sure he'd want a free hotel room if you would put him up. And before you know it, Jeff Blackwell became the judge, the hybrid
so
administrator.
I got a free hotel room out of the deal, and that was very nice. And so we had teams, from all over the world, essentially phoning in to participate. And I think one of the more interesting was the team from Sierra Leone, who were in the middle of a power outage during the competition. And so the only way they were able to participate was to have, and so some basic rules of really any moot court competition. You're not allowed to have your cell phones out. You're not allowed to be like looking stuff up while the oral arguments are going on. They had their phones out, and this caused a little bit of a problem at one point. But once they explained that they're in the middle of a power outage, one cell phone they have as a hotspot so that they can get on the call at all, and the other phone was the light they were using to light themselves on Zoom. And these are the lengths that these students would go to be able to participate. And also the whole competition's in English. So for, I don't know the demographics, but for a ton of these students, English is not your first language. And it is, I was incredibly impressed by the students, by all the students that competed, but also the dedication that a lot of these teams had to have to participate remotely, be able to, set up AV and have a reliable internet connection in situations that were often not the worst. We had one round in which, in the middle of the round, there were two separate. So when I say the round, there's we had 6 different courtrooms of hybrid rounds going at the same time. So during one of those sessions, 2 Israeli teams in 2 separate courtrooms were under attack threats and had to go to bomb shelters. Luckily, only for about 10 minutes, because the rules say if you are not able, we made special rules for this particular competition so that we could have hybrid rounds. If a team is not able to connect for 15 minutes, they've essentially forfeit the round. We didn't want to have to make that call for a team that was, through no fault of their own, under that kind of, in those circumstances. And luckily, it only took about 10 minutes for them to be back on. Yeah, it was a reminder of how real all of this is for people when we're sitting here in the US, basically never worrying about these kinds of things. And it just, it brings it home in a way, in a real way.
Yeah. And I'll also say, so the Sierra Leone example that Jeff used, where they were literally using their phones to light the room and use as a hotspot, they won that round. Fun fact.
They did.
That is funny.
Which is really cool. There were, and some of the teams were obviously did not have the best internet connections and they were doing the best they could. I will say there was one, so there were 20, give or take 22, 23 online teams of the 172 teams. 55 advanced to the elimination rounds total. One of them was an online team. So one team did advance, and that was actually Nigeria, who came damn close to winning their first elimination match.
Yeah.
Possibly making Jeff have to do more work for an additional round, but it was they ended up losing, so Jeff was able to judge instead of be hybrid administrator. But
I was rooting for them, but I also did really want to judge, because that's why I go there.
Right. So Jeff had a very important role this year, which was to keep the hybrid rounds going and also make sure us judges weren't stupid and did dumb tech things like.
Oh yeah. I had a standing rule for all the judges. Do not touch anything. I know you've probably been on plenty of Zoom calls, but I don't want you to screw anything up. Do not touch anything.
So anyway, that's what Jeff and I, and that was Jeff's role. My role, which has not just been a this year thing, I've been doing this for a bunch of years, is I am the judge coordinator for the international rounds. So I help both find the judges to come in, and I also put them on panels for each of the rounds. And I've been volunteering that ever since COVID happened. Shout out to, and pour one out for Rusty Delfres, who was the judge coordinator for years. I couldn't even tell you for how long he did it, but unfortunately he passed away during the COVID years and I took over. So I brought all this up, not just because it's something that Jeff and I really enjoy doing. For me, it's been a phenomenal, both personal and business development week. I've actually represented foreign sovereigns because of my connections with the Jessup competition, foreign sovereigns including Canada, Moldova, Armenia, and Guatemala. And I've gotten some really interesting business out of it, and it's just a really cool competition.
And to be clear, when you're saying foreign sovereigns, you mean you are in court representing an entire country?
Correct. I am representing the government. I am. The fun one with Canada is I am actually an agent of the crown, according to the document that they gave me.
La-di-da.
It's fun to say that you're representing the government of someone. I will also say this may not shock you. The red tape is super fun. It is. I will still occasionally tell the story of, and I won't say which country it was, but where I was asking for, let's just say, a small amount of money to extend one matter I was working on. And I mean, I was asking for a few $1,000s, and I was on a Zoom call with 26 different people to try to justify that couple $1,000. And I really came close on the call to be like, let's just not have the call and give me $2,000. That would be a better use of the time we're using right now. And in the end,
true.
because it literally turns out there were 6 different government, parts of the government that had to approve what I needed to do. And 5 of them approved and 1 didn't. Therefore, I didn't get the money. Never. That was a sidebar. That was a sidebar and a sidebar. However, the whole purpose of this is for me to get a little bit on my soapbox and talk about how stupid it is that we had to do this.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
Listen, I get it. Immigration system in the United States is broken. There's a lot of countries where it's broken. There is no scenario on the planet where a wholesale ban on anyone from one country coming into the country, or having anyone applying to come in with a visa from one country having to put up, $100,000 bond or whatever it is. That's not the answer. You cannot tell me that these students who have spent months and months preparing for a competition, and for some of them, they eat it, live it, breathe it. It is not an easy competition to prepare for. Jeff can certainly talk about the fact that I'm going to make a pretty wild guess that, you may have spent more time on this than you even did on your actual schooling at times.
It was more than I spent on any one other class. And you mentioned we get sort of the facts of the case in September, and then the written portion, the written briefs are due in January. So you have like 4 months, which sounds like plenty of time, but especially for American students, you're doing research in areas of law that you have never looked at before, and that have a completely different way of working than how American law works. Normally, our research when we do this podcast is, I will go to the standard databases that I have access to and search for cases, search for statutes, maybe search for some legislative history of those statutes, all within like LexisNexis or Westlaw, these databases that are tailor-made for exactly that kind of research. None of them do anything when it comes to international law. So you're spending several months learning new areas of the law, learning new methods of research, and then making your argument with your teammates in writing. And then once you're finished with that, come January, you start having to practice giving your arguments orally to, panels of sit-in judges. And it's a lot of work. Like I said, it was more than I had to devote to any of my other classes because it was not the majority of my time that year of law school. It's intensive. And I can say that, I spent part of my winter break working on drafting those pleadings because I didn't have enough time during class. So all these students have gone through this. Some of them, many of them, in not their native language. It is a daunting task, and I'm always impressed by how well the students are able to argue. And, we're throwing questions at them left and right to figure out how much research they've done, see if they've thought through all the different angles of their argument. And they're up there holding their own.
And I'll tell you, this year, all 4 teams from the Philippines made it into the elimination rounds, and one of them made it all the way to the final. That is not, English is not their primary language when they are learning. So for them to do that in their at best second, if not third or fourth language, is very impressive. And it makes it even much more annoying that some of the teams were not able to come to the U.S., not because of financial reasons, not because of, visa issues that are unrelated to, necessarily their country of origin, but simply because we, being the United States, decided that certain countries just shouldn't be allowed to come to the United States.
It may be interesting to discuss the issues that students have to research to compete in this. I'll say when I competed, there was a question of who owned some historic relics from a shipwreck on the seabed. For next year's competition, they haven't announced much. We don't know what the facts of the case will be or anything like that, but we do know the 4 general issues that will be discussed, and those are going to be allegations of gender apartheid, state responses to a mass influx of asylum seekers. That is one area of international law that I have some interaction with, because I do write letters supporting applications for asylum for non-religious asylum seekers currently in the U.S. AI drafted sanctions, and a coup d'etat. So, should be an interesting problem next year.
And I will say, and one thing that is interesting about the competition is that they do tend to find an issue or two that are relevant,
Topical.
to the current, that they are topical and may in fact be happening. And in fact, this year, which it does happen once in a while, this year, the International Court of Justice came down with a decision that was actively relevant to one of the issues, which is always interesting. In fact, there was one year, I'm trying to remember what year it was, Jeff. Wasn't there a year where they had to say you have to ignore a decision because it was so on point?
Yes.
That happens, like, even with the bar exam, there's usually a grace period of, like, you don't have to know cases for the last X number of months,
Sure,
because it's too
Right.
new.
So with Jessup, what they do is, it's only happened, I think, once since I've been part of it, but there was one year where they literally said, this case does not exist for purposes of our competition.
Because they like answered 3 different questions.
It literally, it was like 100% on point. Now, obviously they could make use of the, figure out
The arguments?
Yeah,
Like,
of course.
Here's the winning argument.
Right. But at the same time, and again, the purpose of any moot court, Herman, is not necessarily to win. It is to have, to be able to argue appropriately and answer the questions from the judges and so on and so forth. We are very much hoping that Jeff will not have to reprise his role as hybrid administrator potentially ever again. Certainly
Hopefully
not soon.
I mean, again, if it happens, I'll do it, but because, the show must go on. But
Obviously. But the teams were, as Jeff said, they were very good about it, as we would expect. When the Uganda team made it, both teams were super stoked to see them, gave them hugs. Yeah. They gave them hugs when they saw them.
I imagine everybody who is there is upset that, the other people cannot be there.
Yeah. Correct. There was another team, and I forget where the team was from, who they weren't subject to a visa ban, so therefore they couldn't compete online because it was a reason outside of a ban or whatever. They got their visas on Sunday and just came and competed against teams on Wednesday and Thursday because they showed up. And so teams that actually already been eliminated from the competition argued with them so that they could actually have a full competition, which was really cool. It's a very awesome competition. Most of the teams are, and I've said to all the teams, enjoy what you have. The Jessup is a very unique thing. I am just very disappointed that not all of them could come, and for other reasons, not just we couldn't raise the funds or we couldn't, whatever. No. It is because our country decided that they needed to ban any person residing in the country or a citizen from a country from being able to come to the United States. And there are concerns with our immigration policies, with our immigration rules. I hate the fact that there are so many, people who get visas and then overstay their visas, which is a problem for other people trying to get visas from the country, because if you overstay your visa, you are here illegally. And obviously there's a whole, I think we're really trying to crack down on that. That's a perfectly fine crackdown. Crack down on the people who are overstaying for no reason and, things like that. Doesn't mean you need to pick a country and say no one can come in from that country. Because let's be honest, the students who are coming in for something like this, they're not the problem. They're the people that are actually trying to actively learn and become better, learn more about everything, and honestly just be good people. I just hate the fact that we had over 20 teams that couldn't do that. So, fingers crossed, we never have to do that again. fingers crossed that Jeff does not have to be the hybrid administrator ever again. And I very much hope that the Jessup competition goes back to being an entirely in-person comp, because it's more fun when you get everyone there. And I'll tell you, like, the online years, we got through the online years during the COVID years, but it was not the same. You know, what's part of the fun is being there in person and seeing all these teams. And, you know, I've met some teams or from students who ultimately became judges, and I've judged on panels with them after judging them. So it's a very interesting competition. It's a lot of fun. If you're a lawyer, I highly recommend you get involved. And if you are not a lawyer, well, hope you had a little bit of a enjoyment of us talking about it. And fingers crossed that it goes back to in-person very soon. Anything else, Jeff?
I will. I guess, should we acknowledge that you and I both won awards for outstanding volunteer
Yes.
service?
Sure. I mean, you are, Mike, speaking to 2 Pam Young recipients.
Oh my goodness!
As for
I am honored.
Excellence in volunteering.
I need to get autographs, guys.
Genuflect when you join this call, Mike.
But also, I am in fact a 2-time.
Oh my goodness!
Award
I'm
winner.
honored. I'm double honored.
So between the 3 of us, we have 3 Pam Young awards.
And that's all the listener needs to know, that we have 3 of
Yes.
them between the 3 of us.
Between the 3 of us.
I expect to get I'll come visit. You can give it to me.
But in a very sweet way, thank you to Michael Pyle, the executive director, for the awards. They were awards that he, in his sole discretion, are allowed to give, and he gave one to Jeff and one to me, which was very nice. And it is very much appreciated, but we are forever going to refer to ourselves as the Pam Young Award-winning
As the 3
podcast hosts.
do you know one other podcast that is a 3-time award-winning? I don't know what the award is again. I forgot already.
I can honestly say, Jeff,
Pam Young.
I got to assume that I think we have the most Pam Youngs for any podcast.
It's true.
Very proud.
I'm
Very
willing to
proud.
plant that flag, yeah.
I'll call my mom and tell her about that right now.
Love all of this. All right. Great talk, guys. If anyone who's listening has questions about the Jessup competition or otherwise wants to get involved, you know what to do, or you don't. Comment, reach out, email us, message us, do whatever the hell you want to do. We'll find you. Trust us.
Maximum Derek.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2026, all rights reserved.